It was the kind of neighborhood that looked perfect from a distance, brick front homes with neatly trimmed hedges, driveways so clean they might as well be marble, and American flags gently swaying on perfectly centered poles. From the outside, Magnolia Drive was a suburban dream. But on the inside? It was a powder keg waiting for the right spark. And somehow, my wife's footsteps lit the fuse. Her name is Marisol. And if you met her, you'd know that calling her loud would be like accusing a cloud of being disruptive. She's 5 feet 3 inches, 29 weeks pregnant, and walks with the kind of gentle shuffle that makes you instinctively want to open a door for her. She doesn't stomp. She glides. And yet, according to our HOA president, Mrs. Karen Ledbetter, known in hushed tones as Karen by most of the neighborhood, Marisol was guilty of intentionally disruptive footfall. Yeah, I hadn't heard that phrase before either. Let me rewind. We moved into Cedarstone Reserve about 6 months ago. A pretty place. Quiet. We figured it was the perfect spot to raise our first child. A place where the baby could take its first steps on safe sidewalks and we could walk hand in hand to the community park. What we didn't count on was the ever-watchful gaze of Karen Ledbetter, the woman who lived 3 doors down in the corner house with the bay windows and binoculars always resting just within reach. From day one, Karen had been suspicious of us. Maybe it was my beard. Maybe it was the way Marisol wore her hair in braids. Or maybe, deep down, Karen simply couldn't stand the idea that someone new had moved in without asking her permission first. She never said hello. She never waved. She just watched. Then came the notes. First it was about our trash cans, apparently placed 0.4 feet too far from the curb. Then it was our porch light, too bright, might disturb nesting robins. Next came a letter that claimed our doormat was graphically unwelcoming. It just said home sweet home. We laughed at first. But then Karen stopped leaving notes and started using the HOA's formal complaint system. And that's when things got real. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepares us for what happened on a Tuesday afternoon in June. It was 4:13 p.m. I remember because I was on a Zoom call when it happened. Marisol had decided to stretch her legs, walking down to the mailbox and back like she did every day to help her circulation. The sun was out. The sidewalk was clear. She walked past Karen's house, just like she had every other afternoon. Only this time, Karen was standing on her porch with a phone in one hand and a scowl so deep it looked carved. From what the neighbors later told me, it happened fast. Karen watched Marisol pass, narrowed her eyes, and said, loudly enough for half the street to hear, "That is unacceptable." Then she dialed 911. The dispatcher recording was released later. But I'll never forget the transcript I got a hold of. Dispatcher, 911, what's your emergency? Karen, yes, I'd like to report suspicious behavior. There's a woman walking aggressively past my home. She's stomping. On purpose. I think she's threatening me through the vibrations. Dispatcher, ma'am, is she shouting or physically approaching you? Karen, no, but she's walking with intent. And she's very pregnant. I believe it's some sort of intimidation tactic. Let that sink in. My pregnant wife was walking with intent, and that, apparently, constituted a threat. The police arrived 4 minutes later, 2 cruisers with lights on but no sirens. One parked diagonally across our driveway, blocking my car. The other pulled up beside Karen's manicured lawn. Marisol was already back inside when I heard the knock. I answered the door, and there they were, 2 officers, hands near their holsters, expressions carefully neutral. Sir, the taller one said, we received a report of a disturbance involving your wife. Marisol, confused and barefoot, peeked around the corner. A disturbance? Karen was outside now, arms crossed, one hand pointing toward our home like she was calling in an airstrike. She came up the sidewalk like she owned it, Karen shouted, and I could feel the tremors. I have sensitive windows. One officer turned to her. Ma'am, she was walking. Stomping. Karen barked. Like she was trying to make a statement. The officer looked at Marisol's rounded belly. "You're expecting?" Marisol nodded slowly. "Yes. And I have swelling in my feet. That's probably why I walk the way I do." "Is there a problem?" The other officer cleared his throat awkwardly. "We're just doing a wellness check. It doesn't appear there's any crime. Sorry to bother you." But as they left, Karen shouted after them, "She'll do it again, just wait. She's planning something." And that's when I realized this wasn't about noise. It wasn't even about sidewalks. It was about power. About Karen's need to control everything she saw, and her growing frustration that Marisol's quiet strength didn't bow to her nonsense. That night, I watched Marisol sit on the couch rubbing her feet, trying to stay calm. "She called the cops on my walk," she said softly. I sat beside her. "No. She called the cops because she's scared of what she can't control." Marisol smiled faintly. "Then she should be terrified. Because I'm not stopping. Neither am I." The morning after the 911 call, I half expected everything to go back to normal. I figured Karen had gotten her drama fix and would retreat into her porch with her binoculars and lemon tea. I was wrong. Instead, when I opened our front door to retrieve the paper, I found it folded perfectly and slipped under the welcome mat like a passive-aggressive booby trap, a formal HOA violation notice with a seal that looked more official than anything that should have been printed on a $60 inkjet printer. Violation #382C, repetitive high-impact footfall on shared community pathways. I actually laughed out loud. It sounded like something a sci-fi villain would accuse a rebel of. "You've broken the sacred covenant of footfall, citizen." But the laughter stopped when I turned the notice over and saw what Karen had attached. 6 signatures. 6 neighbors had signed off on the complaint. That stung. We had waved at them. Marisol had brought over banana bread to one of them during the first week we moved in. And now they were accusing her of creating structural agitation to nearby foundations. Apparently, Karen had gone door to door the previous evening after her failed 911 drama and convinced people to co-sign her vendetta under the guise of preserving community integrity. We had lived here for just 6 months, and already we were enemy number 1. But what Karen didn't know, what no one in that neighborhood seemed to realize, was that I'm not the kind of man to get bullied quietly. I wasn't just a web developer working from home. I had once managed PR damage control for billion-dollar tech firms during acquisition scandals. If anyone knew how to untangle a lie and flip the narrative with cold precision, it was me. So I started gathering evidence. I pulled up our Ring camera footage from the day of the alleged threatening walk. The sound of Marisol's steps. Almost inaudible. Her pace. Slow. Her expression. The kind of tired determination you only see in women carrying life and burdens at once. Then I scoured the HOA bylaws, if you could call them that. What I found made me smirk. Karen had updated them last year and included vague new language about non-disruptive pathway conduct and auditory tranquility expectations. No votes. No signatures. Just red pen and arrogance. Marisol tried to brush it off. "Just let it go," she said. "We'll be gone in a year anyway. We can survive this." But I saw it on her face, the way she paused before walking outside now, how she changed routes to avoid Karen's side of the street. It wasn't about the notice anymore. It was about fear. And I refused to let my wife be afraid in her own neighborhood. So I went on offense. That weekend, I printed off Karen's altered bylaws, side by side with the original ones I pulled from the HOA's filing cabinet at the city records office. Then I walked door to door, calm as a Sunday usher, and handed them out. I didn't argue. I didn't badmouth. I just said, "Hey, just thought you should know what you actually signed up for when you bought into this community." Some slammed the door. But others? Others started reading. By Tuesday, Karen had a problem. 3 board members called for an emergency review. One of them, Mrs. Hargrove, who lived across the street and had signed the complaint, came over that afternoon and apologized to Marisol with tears in her eyes. I'm so sorry. She said you were shouting and stomping. She said she felt threatened. I didn't realize. I didn't know you were pregnant. Marisol, ever gracious, simply smiled and thanked her. That night, Karen retaliated. She filed a new complaint, this time claiming I was conducting unauthorized community lobbying and engaging in digital manipulation. I had sent PDFs. Digital manipulation? But the kicker came 2 days later. We were sitting down to dinner, chicken piccata, Marisol's favorite, when we heard a knock. I opened the door to find a courier holding a thick envelope. Inside? A cease and desist. From the HOA's private attorney. It accused me of defamatory conduct against the association president and intentional disruption of peaceful community governance. And right there, in bold letters near the bottom, further action may include legal proceedings. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was pathetic. Karen had called the cops on a pregnant woman, drafted fake footfall policies, whipped up neighbors into a frenzy, and now she wanted to sue us for defending ourselves? She didn't know what was coming. Because that envelope? That was the final domino I needed. I sent the cease and desist letter, along with Karen's fake bylaws, the ring footage, and a timeline of events, to a local investigative journalist I knew from my PR days. I didn't expect much. Maybe a blog post. Maybe a tweet. But the journalist called me the next morning. I love this, she said. It's ridiculous. It's real. And people need to hear about it. And hear about it they did. It started with a tweet. Just a simple, 12-word post from a local journalist with a modest following. Pregnant woman accused of walking too loudly, HOA president calls 911. Attached was a single screenshot from the ring footage, Marisol, belly round and hands gently cradling a bundle of mail, walking past Karen's house under a clear blue sky. That was it. By noon, it had gone viral. Reddit caught wind first. Then a local news aggregator picked it up. By dinner, it was on the homepages of 2 national outlets with headlines like, Pregnant Woman Targeted by HOA for Walking Too Loudly, and Suburban Drama Turns Orwellian as Footsteps Spark 911 Call. We didn't want to become a national story. But there we were, Marisol and I, staring at our TV in disbelief as anchors recited Karen's complaints on air, barely containing their laughter. What followed was chaos. Not for us, but for Karen. The next HOA board meeting, originally scheduled for the following month, was hastily moved up. Word had spread. Attendance exploded. People who hadn't set foot in a meeting in years were now packed shoulder to shoulder in the community center auditorium. Some brought popcorn. A few brought lawn chairs. Karen showed up late. When she walked in, clipboard clutched like a Bible, pearls around her neck, people turned to stare. There were whispers. Some neighbors looked away entirely. Others leaned in closer, waiting for the show. She took the podium like she always did, confident, poised, voice clipped and authoritative. There has been a gross misrepresentation of the facts, she began. What happened last week was a misunderstanding between neighbors. It has been manipulated by outside media interests to damage our community's reputation. You could almost hear the air deflate in the room. Then she added the fatal phrase. I will not apologize for doing my duty to protect our residents from threatening behavior, no matter how disguised it may seem. Gasps. A few murmurs. One older man in the back let out a long, sarcastic "oh boy." And that's when Mrs. Hargrove stood up. Let me paint the picture, late 60s, always in floral cardigans, owns the best pecan pie recipe on the block. She wasn't loud. She wasn't angry. She just rose from her seat and said, Karen, I co-signed that complaint because I trusted you. I believed what you told me. But what you did, what you said, that wasn't community protection. That was cruelty. And I won't stand for it anymore. Karen blinked. A flicker of something crossed her face, shock, maybe. Panic? She opened her mouth to respond, but the dam had broken. 3 more residents stood up. Then 5. Then the treasurer of the HOA board, James Patel, quiet, numbers guy, stood and spoke with a voice that shook. I motioned to suspend Karen Ledbetter from her duties as HOA president pending a full community review. It was like watching a queen dethroned in real time. Karen stammered. You can't do that. I was elected. And now, James said, you're being unelected. The vote was unanimous. She walked out, lips tight, shoulders stiff, not looking at anyone. A few people clapped. One person cheered. I didn't. I just turned to Marisol and squeezed her hand. But the story didn't end there. Because once the curtain lifted, people started digging. Journalists. Residents. Even the city council. Turns out, Karen had a history. She'd quietly rewritten HOA guidelines without board consent multiple times over the past 3 years. Added arbitrary policies. Issued fines for things like excessive bird feeders and overly fragrant bushes. She had rejected 3 separate home renovation permits despite unanimous board approval, because she didn't like the vibe. One woman was fined for having wind chimes. Another man received a violation for having a laugh that carried. And the money? Oh, the money. Thousands in collected HOA fines. Hundreds spent on administrative upgrades and outreach materials. But when the board reviewed the receipts, yoga class punch cards, boutique tea subscriptions, a single $900 charge labeled aesthetic research trip, which turned out to be a weekend at a luxury spa in Napa. People were furious. A petition circulated, not just to remove Karen permanently, but to overhaul the entire HOA structure. And for once, the neighborhood wasn't divided. People who hadn't agreed on anything in years were now sharing lemonade and signatures. I saw a kid riding his bike down the street with a handmade sign clipped to his basket. Let people walk. Fire Karen. It felt surreal. Meanwhile, Marisol was finally smiling again when she stepped outside. Neighbors waved. Someone brought us a casserole. The mood on Magnolia Drive shifted, like the air had been cleared after a long, bitter storm. Karen, of course, didn't disappear quietly. The next week, she filed a civil complaint against the HOA for wrongful suspension of leadership duties. Claimed she'd been slandered. That the news coverage had weaponized her compassion. But by then, even her closest allies had stopped returning her calls. If you've ever seen someone unravel in real time, you know the look. It's not just in the eyes. It's in the little things, the way their voice jumps octaves, the way they move too quickly or not at all. It's the expression that says, this world isn't bending the way I'm used to, and I don't know how to stop it. Karen snapped on a Wednesday. It had been 2 weeks since her public dethroning. 2 weeks since the cease and desist backfired, the investigation into her misused HOA funds began, and Magnolia Drive went from a quiet street to a case study in community rebellion. I had just come back from the grocery store when I saw her, standing in the middle of the sidewalk, in front of our house, arms crossed, staring at the pavement like it had insulted her. Marisol was on the porch, watering her rosemary planter. She froze when she saw Karen. I pulled into the driveway, slowly. Karen turned and marched toward me. You think this is over, she said before I even got out of the car. You think you've won? I stepped out, hands visible, calm. Karen, please leave our property. She stepped onto the grass, our lawn, and pointed at the sidewalk like it held sacred truth. She walks past my house. Every single day. She's allowed to. She does it louder now. Don't act like you haven't noticed. The pacing. The rhythm. It's aggressive. My mouth parted in disbelief. Aggressive footsteps? She stomps. Karen's voice rose, trembling at the edges. It's intimidation. You've weaponized your wife's pregnancy. I was too stunned to respond. Marisol, bless her, stepped down from the porch. Karen. I walk slower now because my hips ache. I wear soft-soled sneakers. And some days, it takes everything I have just to get to the end of the driveway. I'm not stomping. I'm surviving. That should have ended it. But Karen was unraveling. She turned, stormed back to her car, parked illegally half on our curb, and popped the trunk. What she pulled out made my heart skip. A megaphone. I swear to you. A full-sized megaphone. Attention, she blared, startling birds from the trees. This neighborhood is under assault by individuals who refuse to respect community peace. They've infiltrated our streets. By that point, several neighbors had come outside. One man was still in slippers. A woman across the street was filming. Kids stood frozen beside bicycles. Karen kept going. You all think I'm the villain. But I'm the only one who tried to maintain order. You mock my rules, but you'll miss them when chaos comes. That's when the police arrived. 2 cruisers, no sirens, just that eerie silence they use when they know the situation could go either way. Officer Daniels stepped out, a calm, measured man with a clipboard and the weary expression of someone who'd been here before. He approached slowly. Ms. Ledbetter, he said. We received reports of disturbing the peace. Karen turned, megaphone still in hand. I am exercising my right to warn the public. Daniels looked toward me. I nodded once. He returned his gaze to her. You're trespassing, ma'am. And this is the 3rd incident in as many weeks. Please hand me the megaphone. She didn't. He asked again. This time gently. Karen hesitated, then screamed. I built this neighborhood. Her voice cracked as she hurled the megaphone to the ground, shattering it into plastic shards. And then she did the unthinkable, she sat down. Right there. In our yard. Cross-legged, like a child refusing to leave recess. This is tyranny, she whispered. I'm the only one who followed the rules. A long silence followed. Daniels looked at me, almost apologetically, then radioed for a social care liaison. Karen wasn't arrested. But she was escorted, calmly, quietly, to a waiting car. A woman in a tan blazer with a soft voice walked beside her, asking gentle questions. Karen didn't resist. She just looked small. As they pulled away, one neighbor muttered, that was something. That night, Marisol sat beside me on the couch, hand resting on her belly. Do you think she'll be okay? I didn't know. Maybe. Maybe not. People like Karen build their identities around control. Around being right. And when that crumbles, what's left? But even as I watched her disappear into the night, part of me hoped she'd find something better on the other side of this. Because the truth was, Karen wasn't born a villain. She became one rule at a time. It's been 4 months since Karen was escorted off Magnolia Drive. The grass is greener now, both literally and metaphorically. There's more laughter in the evenings. Neighbors linger longer at mailboxes. The community Facebook page that was once a minefield of passive-aggressive posts and Karen's all-caps memos is now filled with babysitting swaps, lost cat sightings, and invitations to backyard movie nights. We've started healing. The HOA board held a special election. James Patel was voted in as president unanimously. His first order of business? Transparency. His second? Repealing every non-voted amendment Karen had slipped into the bylaws. One of them had declared Tuesday evenings a mandatory porch light dimming hour. No one missed it. Marisol and I were invited to speak at the first new community gathering. Not formally. Just a few words. She stood there, pregnant, glowing, steady, and thanked everyone who had found their courage. She didn't mention Karen's name once. And somehow, that said more than anything. Later that night, James approached us with a box. Inside were the original HOA founding documents, yellowed, dusty, the kind you only find in basement archives or forgotten drawers. We want to rewrite these, he said, together. With the people who actually live here. So we did. In the weeks that followed, we gathered in garages and on porches, drinking sweet tea and passing around drafts. We talked about what community should mean, what it could mean when it wasn't used to punish but to uplift. We wrote in a clause called the Human Dignity Provision, which simply stated, no rule shall override the rights of any neighbor to walk, speak, live, or exist in peace on shared land. That was Marisol's idea. Our daughter was born on a Saturday morning in October, as the leaves turned golden and a soft breeze whispered through our open windows. We named her Amara, which means grace. The day we brought her home, the sidewalk was lined with chalk messages. Welcome, Amara. The quietest steps can leave the loudest legacy. She walks because she can. Even Karen, strangely, sent something. A card. Handwritten. Just 4 words, I'm sorry. Be well. No return address. Some nights, I still think about that moment on the lawn. About the megaphone. The unraveling. The sitting down. Not because I'm angry, but because it reminds me how fragile power is when it's built on fear. Karen thought she owned Magnolia Drive. But it never belonged to her. It belonged to all of us. To the early morning dog walkers. The kids chasing ice cream trucks. The elderly couples who waved from their porches. And yes, to a tired, radiant woman, carrying life and groceries, walking with swollen ankles and quiet resolve. Magnolia Drive still has cracks in the sidewalk. But we don't hide from each other anymore. We walk. Proudly. Softly. Loudly, when we need to. Because in this neighborhood, footsteps don't threaten, they remind us we're home.